Hi, my name is Stephen Matthew, and I'll be doing my presentation on the stop and frisk and what are the legal issues behind that and for today. The legal issue of stop and frisk is, does it actually violate any of your amendment rights by law and by practice, which is the difference between the two right now. The first court case that came about was Terry versus Ohio. The second court case that is more relevant for today in New York was Sheridan Floyd versus the City of New York. I'm going to start with is stop and frisk or stop and arrest. That's a lot of debate right now about what they feel, what citizens feel like stop and frisk actually is. They say about like 88% of stop and frisk victims are actually innocent and they're not actually doing anything wrong, so why are they being stopped? So the definition of stop and frisk is when a police officer temporarily detains somebody and pats down their outer clothing when there are specific articulable facts leading a reasonable police officer to believe a person is armed and dangerous. Right there leads a little bit of unclear, because to one officer what something might deem, another officer might act a different kind of way. And in law and by action are two different things. In law, the legal issue is the problem here, because by law it's written down and saying something, and that does this by statement does not violate your Fourth Amendment right, but by practice is where it does. Here's a quick video clip of how that is actually shown.
That controversial tactic designed to stop crime before it happens. Controversial because critics say 250s rarely happen with this much courtesy and this much probable cause. They say the NYPD stops and frisks way too many innocent men of color for no good reason.
He was holding me, he was going through your pockets, going up, down.
You want to go to jail? For what? Shut your mouth.
Why am I getting arrested for?
Shut your mouth.
What am I getting arrested for?
For being a mutt, you know?
That's a law, being a mutt. He was going through my sweater. Then that's when he told me to keep my hands on my head. So I was like this the whole time.
Frustrated by how often he was being stopped in his Harlem neighborhood, a 16-year-old son of a cop named Alvin says he hit record on his iPod one night in 2011 as two undercover officers approached.
Our job is to look for suspicious behavior. You keep looking at us like that, looking back.
Because y'all always like stop. I just got stopped like 2 blocks away. Like,
Listen to me. When you walk in the block with your hood up and you keep looking back at us like that, bro,
So as you clearly see, the officer very aggressive with the young boy. Definitely does not lead just because he's walking in, like he said, with his hood on. Does not read. For one officer, that might be it. So that's why this is such a big deal. Here's the first court case that was brought about, which is Terry versus Ohio. In this court case, on October 31st, 1963, gentlemen named John Terry and Richard Clinton were standing on a street corner. On the street corner, Detective Martin McFadden was looking at them and saw them acting in a very suspicious manner. He watched them for a little bit, waited, was watching them. They were standing on the street corner, not necessarily doing anything, but looking kind of suspicious. A third gentleman walked over. They had an interaction with him, thought it was very weird. Walking up and down the corner, just kind of like looking around the block. Officer thought that was weird. And then later, both the gentlemen went into the corner store. When they went into the corner store, the police officer went in, had a conversation with the two gentlemen, patted them both down, and at patting them down, patting his outer clothing down, had found a pistol on Mr. Terry. Later patted down Mr. Clinton, found a pistol on him too, arrested both of them. They went to court. They both made a statement saying that the plaintiff was in violation of the Fourth Amendment right. The outcome of the case there was no violation of their Fourth Amendment right at all, and actually they were wrong. They had a disclosed armed weapon on them, which led them to be armed and dangerous. So in this instance, there was nothing wrong, and this was an example of what the stop and frisk was supposed to do and how it was supposed to protect people. The update on the issue today, it's still a heavily debated topic today, especially in New York. The case in New York, which is Sheridan Floyd versus the City of New York, in conclusion in this case, that New York City was reliable for violating the plaintiff's 4th and 14th Amendment right. The city acted in a deliberate indifference toward the NYPD practice of making unconstitutional stops and unconstitutional frisks. So as you see in the video, that the stop and frisk can do some good in the court case, as you've seen, with a guy holding a gun, but in certain instances where the stop and frisk is not being held to what the law was intended to be. Thank you, and that's my presentation.